Is greed overwhelming our country? Joe Cotchett thinks it is. You're going to want to hear what he has to say. The game is greed. The game is on. Welcome to the game. I'm Mark Simon. As we survey the wreckage of a nation beset by a divisive and nasty presidential campaign, we're going to talk today about one of the main forces that may be contributing to the problem: greed. Our friend Joe Cotchett, one of the leading attorneys in the nation representing victims of the full range of corporate misconduct, has written a new book, The People versus Greed, Stealing America, Main Street versus Wall Street, The Continued Erosion of Ethics in Our Professions, Business, and Government. And he's here with us to talk about it. Joe is senior partner at the firm of Cotchett, Pitre and McCarthy. Joe, thanks for being here.
Good morning, Mark.
I wish you'd made the title longer on the book, though. Let's talk.
No, it's very short. People versus Greed, Stealing America.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that itself. You know, tell me, describe the theme of the book other than the title.
The theme of the book is really very simple.
Yeah.
So we had an economic crisis in 2008, 2009, when Wall Street was stealing money from little people on their mortgages, right? Name me, this is a challenge, you're going to be tested on this, name me one single executive that went to jail.
None, right?
None.
Yeah.
That's the problem with our country. That's the stealing of America. Wall Street is stealing America. Wall Street is stealing both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Don't forget that. Everybody thinks that this is a Republican problem. It's not a Republican. It's not Donald Trump. It is everybody across the nation in leadership is bowing to money. It's called Citizens United. Today, I can buy any politician by telling them I'm going to walk in and write you $1 million check, and the response is, "Gee, what did you want for that?" So,
Wall Street's buying America. To what end? Is it basically just
legislation? Buying legislation.
But the amassing of wealth, is that the whole point?
That's what it's all about. Everything is about who's got more money in the bank. Look at this Wall Street. Look at the hedge funds, and the aspect of how they're paying taxes on hedge funds. Even Donald Trump, the idiot that he is saying we've got to stop the greed from the hedge funds, but he means Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And we just give in to Wall Street. I mean, you have no idea of what Wall Street has done. Greece, Puerto Rico, little cities, school districts across the country that sell bonds for new schools, that all goes through Wall Street, you understand, with big, huge commissions. And unfortunately, many of the little people, and I don't mean to say little people, many of the people that are sitting as good citizens on these school boards have no concept of the economics of what they're paying. So they're going to get a $10 million bond to build beautiful new $10 million school. Little do they know that the public is paying for that school $60 to $70 million in interest rates 30 years later. Well, they're dead 30 years later, as you and I will be. But our children, you see, will pay that $70 million. They will owe it in 30, 40 years. That's the problem. Nobody understands the economics. They look at their paycheck today, and boom, that's it.
You talked about Wall Street in the book. You talked a lot about Big Pharma.
How Big Pharma is a disgrace. Only in the United States can Big Pharma get away with what it gets away with. They put a pill on the market. It's going to cost you $6. 1 year later, that same pill that you are now taking on a regular basis is $600. That's the name of that game. They keep generics out of the marketplace. It's a simple game. A generic comes along to replace a prescription drug. They sue the generic for copying their patent, right, on the drug. They settle the case 10 days later by paying the generic money to go away. The generic's now gone. It is such a game. It is such a fraud. Nobody goes to jail. Look at Wells Fargo. People walked in to get a credit card, and little did they know, Hispanics, African Americans, minorities walked away with 5 different cards, some of them signed by Wells Fargo employees at the request of their supervisors, right? How is that any different from stealing your personal information?
I don't know. Let's talk a little bit about the healthcare industry, because your book spends a lot of time talking about
probably the biggest fraud in America today.
Abuses in diagnoses, abuses in surgery.
Yeah. How about the little domestic in Los Angeles? We now have 400 to 600 cases of this. The domestic in Los Angeles that has a bad back, she goes in to see her chiropractor. The chiropractor takes an MRI, right? MRI of her back. Says, boy, you have a problem, Juanita. You need surgery here. You go see Dr. Smith. She goes over to see Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith says, you know what? I want a new MRI. Takes a new MRI. Says, Mrs. Smith, let me show you. Excuse me, Juanita, let me show you. You need a rod inserted in your back because your back is bad. That's a titanium rod. Don't worry about it. Workman's Comp will pay for it. Or the insurance company will pay for it. That rod is billed at $19,000. 4 screws are billed at $6,000 each. You ready for the real truth? The MRI she was shown at the chiropractor was a fraud. It wasn't even her. The second MRI was not even her. She never needed surgery to start with. See the little rod they put in her back for $19,000, titanium? They have to put titanium because otherwise if you use a different metal, it'll disintegrate in your body. And the 4 screws. That little rod is now made down in Temecula in a machine shop for $1.56. The screws are 36 cents each. They get billed at $6,000. You know who pays for that? Everybody watching this show. You, me, and everybody watching this show. Ready for this? You think a doctor will go to jail? Nah, the doctor will lose his license. That's it.
You've mentioned at the very beginning, you started by talking about nobody from Wall Street went to jail. Why isn't anybody being prosecuted? Is it that they're just way ahead of anybody who might be trying to prosecute them?
No. It's because they have high-priced attorneys that rotate in and out of the government, right? In and out of the Department of Justice. It is all such a fraud. It's a game. It's a scam. You know, I'm just amazed at this current election, as you are and everybody else is. But the one thing I will say about Donald Trump, he does have his finger on the fact that there's outrageousness. He will now admit he hasn't, paid taxes for all these years because of the loopholes. Why do we allow those loopholes in the Donald Trumps of the world that are simply stealing? Why do we allow a government to exist that doesn't go after the Donald Trumps, that bring in undocumented people to work on the goddamn hotels, huh?
Well, why don't they? Why don't they go after people like that?
Why don't they? Because I guess Donald Trump gives a lot of campaign contributions to a lot of people, attends a lot of weddings of a lot of people, attends a lot of social events of a lot of people.
It's a closed circle. You know, one of the other things that Donald Trump has been saying is the system is rigged. Maybe not in the way he has intended it, but it sounds like you think it is too.
No. I don't want to say rigged. It's used in a way that is not democratic. Okay? That's a little different than rigged. And what I mean by that is we have a constitution. People are not abiding by that constitution. Look, we have 8 people sitting on the Supreme Court. We can't get the U.S. Senate to put that 9th judge up there, okay? And you heard what John McCain and Cruz said the other day?
Never. Yeah.
Never. They're not going to approve a judge. And if 2 more go, we're going to be down to 6 people. That's not what our forefathers wanted. Our forefathers wanted a judiciary that could look at the other 2 branches and see what they were doing wrong. I mean, there's a judge in New York City, Jed Rakoff, one of the few federal judges with the guts to refuse to accept these SEC deals, settlements, with the Goldman Sachs of the world. He says, I want someone to plead guilty.
Yeah. We're going to take a break on that note. Stick around. We'll be right back with Joe Cotchett talking about his new book, The People versus Greed. Welcome back to The Game. I'm Mark Simon, and we're joined by Joe Cotchett. I believe the term high-powered attorney was invented for Joe. He's written a book called The People versus Greed, Stealing America. I recommend it if you want to have a measure of bile with your cereal in the morning, because it'll make you pretty angry. We're talking about some of the major forces in our economy and how they were basically manipulating it. It's a question you and I have talked about over lunch on more than one occasion. and maybe it's because I'm just naive, but I don't get where this greed comes from. There isn't enough for some of these folks. How much is enough? It's like, why would you continue to accumulate more money than you could spend in your lifetime, or that even if you left it to your children, they could spend in a lifetime?
Yeah, because our economy, our society is pushing that. Just turn on the ads on TV and look at what you see. Look at the shoes that women are buying today. Look at the fashions that even men are buying today. Why do you have to wear a $3,000 suit? Tell me. See the suit you're wearing? That's your $2,000 suit, isn't it?
No, it's on sale at Brooks Brothers. What can I tell you?
There you go. Yeah. My point is our society pushes it. We're pushing the wrong aspects of morality. That's where we are. It's as simple as that. Arrogance. Yeah. Arrogance leads to greed, and you see, you're a big, high-powered guy if you got a lot of money in your pocket.
You went after Keating. You interviewed Bernie Madoff, one of the few people who got to talk to him.
The only lawyer, along with Nancy Feynman, that got to talk to him.
Give me a little insight into their mindset.
Because, good.
Because for me, it's not, I can't understand.
Yeah.
And we talked about this. They think nothing of taking whatever they want whenever they want it.
And you know what's very interesting about the Madoff thing? Madoff essentially was held out to be a very religious Jew. Do you know who he stole from?
Other Jews.
Jews, temples,
yeah.
Jewish organizations he went to. Can you imagine that?
Now, how can he look at himself in the mirror in the morning and say, this is okay?
Very easy.
Yeah.
I got a lot of money, pal.
Yeah.
Huh? Did you know that we found out that Bernie used to do dope every Friday afternoon? He'd send his little guy up to the Bronx to get a pocket full of doo-doo.
Yeah.
Bring it back on they had a Madoff couch. He'd lay there and snort shit all day long Friday. And he thought that was powerful, you see?
Yeah.
How sad.
Yeah. It's one of the things that's clear in the book, and I was teasing you a little bit about it before we went on the air, that everything in here is citing press.
You bet.
You got most of your resources from the press. And you have the beginning of the book, you talk a lot about the criticality of a free press.
Without a free press, you have no country. But Tell me the country that exists without a free press.
But we have a disappearing press.
A disappearing press, that's right. Because what's happening is that my children, your children, we're all going to this. You know what this is? It's a buzzword headlines. Yeah. So they're not getting anything in depth. You understand in our schools we don't even teach civics anymore? Go up to a teenager, and this is tragic, and go to my grandchildren, ask them how many members there are on the Supreme Court. Ask them how many members there are of our Congress, of our Senate. That's the tragedy. You see, I just returned from Spain. I was in Spain last week giving a speech in Madrid to the International Academy of Lawyers. I was talking about the rule of law. In Spain, they have a turnout for voting of 90+%. And in other countries, that's the way it is. Now, I don't want to trade the United States for Spain. I'm not suggesting that. What I am telling you, and not even suggesting to you, I'm telling you that our society is breaking down because we're just looking at money, money, money. The biggest money hogs in this country, one of the biggest, are your defense contractors. They're the people that love wars. Remember in Iraq, in Afghanistan, $4 trillion was spent. Over $3 trillion went to defense contractors, right? And what are we seeing now? We hear the word pivot in Washington. You know what the word pivot is all about? The word pivot are all the defense contractors who are hanging around the bars with the lobbyists saying, boy, this China, boy, this Far East, we got to get moving. We got to be looking. We got to pivot our defense mentality to the Far East now. Why? New airplanes, new big aircraft carriers, so we can build those, spend money, huh? It's
a more conventional sense, sort of Cold War mentality,
Absolutely.
Which a lot of people think is really not appropriate for the military anymore.
That's right.
You're an Army man. What's your sense of what's happened to the military?
You know, all the Army people, uniformed people I know are fabulous, with the exception of a few generals that rotate in and out of the game and in cahoots with, you just read about the admiral in San Diego, or the captain, I should say, taking bribes for landing in Bangkok or wherever the hell it was. The bottom line is we have a fabulous military, we do. It's sometimes up at that leadership level, and those people in Congress that think they can impose upon the Department of Defense contractors living in their districts. Let me be absolutely clear what I mean by that. If they have a big defense contractor living in their district who's giving them lots of contributions, they go over to the Department of Defense and say, why aren't you buying these guns, these weapons, these missiles from these contractors? And then they sell them. You know, it's jobs in my district. Jobs. What's the Defense Department going to say?
Yeah. So the idea of greed, people versus greed, it sounds like it's sort of the foundation for what's been happening in this election.
End of story.
And I just asked an open-ended question, and I'm going to have to take a break. So ponder that for a second.
I will.
Don't go away, and you stick around. We'll be right back with Joe Cotchett. Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. Over here we have Joe Cotchett. I believe in the words of Martin Luther King, he's been a drum major for justice. He's written a book called People versus Greed, Stealing America. I'd recommend you look it up if you want to get really angry about the state of America, if you're not already. And that's really the question I want to get to. There's an awful lot of people who are kind of fed up. And the choices they've got aren't very good. Democracy isn't about getting your choice, it's about having a choice. But I've never seen people so disenchanted and almost despairing. And how much of that is fueled by the issues we've been talking about, the sort of steady corruption of our institutions?
Virtually everything.
Yeah.
Everything is fueled by this greed concept. Medicine, lawyers, don't get me started on lawyers.
Well, you know, you're a well-to-do, successful lawyer.
I am. But I worked hard. I do a lot of pro bono work. But I can tell you there are lawyers out there that contribute mightily. You understand that Wall Street could not succeed without lawyers, okay? Our medical profession is rampant today with fraudulent billing. Again, who pays for that? All of us pay for that, right, in the long run? So you take profession after profession. Look at our accountants today. Now, you understand when I say legal profession, there are thousands of great lawyers out there doing what good lawyers should do every day. It's that handful that are only concerned with greed. It's a handful that take in a case and bill it 30 hours during the day when we know there's only 24 hours in that day, right? And we know they only worked 8 hours, and we know you can only bill 8 hours, and we know that for 4 hours they were out on the golf course. So don't get me wrong, we have marvelous lawyers, we have marvelous doctors. I know many doctors that work literally day and night trying to help people. It's that percentage you see of doctors, lawyers, and accountants and other business types. It's that percentage that steal left and right and create the immoral conduct. Mm-hmm. You create that immoral conduct, and the little guy, the little woman who's working as a decent doctor, lawyer, and said, wait a minute. What's happening to me? Why am I doing this? So it's a big sucking machine, you see, that sucks them in the wrong direction. 1% of America controls something like 40% of all of our assets. That's extraordinary. Extraordinary. Half the people in America live paycheck to paycheck. There's something wrong there, isn't there?
Yeah. The expectations of the public are so low. We were talking off the air about it. Whoever gets elected is likely to be able to exceed those expectations. It's also not your nature to be a pessimist. What is the answer? What do you think we ought to be doing differently? How do we rein this in?
Yeah. We need more people like you. We need, no. It's the press.
Let's take a quick poll on that.
It's the press, you see.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep in my book going back to the press. Without the press, the public would know nothing. Unfortunately, what do we know? We know that about 8 to 9% of our population reads papers anymore. Now they're looking at this and getting just buzzwords. That's the unfortunate problem. It's our schooling. Go back to our schooling. We don't teach civics lessons anymore. I just mentioned that.
Yeah.
That's the problem. We're not teaching the basics to our society. And we're looking at how do you make a buck? Look at college courses today. How do you make a buck? How do you get out there? There's nothing wrong with that if, on the other hand, you're teaching young students what's right and what's wrong. That's the issue. Who was it that gave a speech years ago to the graduating business program, MBA, over at Berkeley that said, greed is good?
Yeah.
Werchek, what was his name?
I remember you talking about it. It was the basis for that line in the movie Wall Street.
Exactly. Greed is good. That's preposterous.
Yeah. But you're talking about institutional issues. The average viewer of this show is not somebody who's got access to a newspaper. Is not somebody.
I see where you're going. All right. So here's my point. My point is that people have to stand up and speak out. That's the problem. I've got 5 kids. I tell all of them, you got to stand up and be heard for what's right. I'd love to tell you all 5 do it. If I got one, I'm lucky that will stand up and scream and yell and shout, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem we're faced with today. People are not standing up. They go, oh, hell, it doesn't affect me. It does affect you. Everything that happens on Wall Street affects you. It affects the food you eat, the drugs you take, the medicine you get, the legal advice you get. When you walk into Wells Fargo Bank and you ask for a credit card, and then you've got 5 other little cards, debit cards and what have you, for which you're being billed $1, $1.25 a month. Do you know what that adds up to?
Yeah.
It goes into the hundreds of millions of dollars being sucked out of our economy. And who are those little people that get, it wouldn't happen to me, I got news for you, at Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
But the little person who walks in, boy, oh boy, God forbid they don't speak great English or can speak out. They're paying undue charges, the likes of which you haven't seen.
Yeah. We got to talk about something that was just in the news media, that you're being looked at as somebody who might be appointed by the governor to be Attorney General. Should Kamala Harris, by the time this airs, the election will be over. We know if she won. It would be an upset of all upsets if she doesn't win. So tell me why you're interested in a job like that.
Well, Jerry's talked to me. I've talked to Jerry. I go back 30, 40 years with Jerry. To be brutally candid with you, I don't think he'll appoint me. I think I'm too outspoken. I love Jerry, don't get me wrong. I think he's a great governor. I think he is one of the few leaders in our country that has really brought a concept of morality back. He's really brought a concept back of why do we need 3 pens when one will write, okay? So I love Jerry. I just think that I might be a little too outspoken for Jerry. I was honored to hear that I was, from some press people, one of 5 or 6 people that even was thinking about, would I run? A lot of people have asked me to run.
I know you've considered it in the past.
And I would spend my own money. I would take no contributions. I wouldn't want anyone. I wouldn't want Mark Simon or anyone that I know to walk up to me and say, Joe, I gave you a $100 contribution. Here's what I'd like you to do for me. That ain't going to happen if I was Attorney General. And it shouldn't happen, because what we have to go to in our society is we've got to be going to a system that is public money is spent on elections only. We got to get rid of Citizens United. I don't want to go into that subject. But where people can give you hundreds of thousands of dollars of contributions, what do you think? If they walk up to you, you just got to say, no, I'm sorry, don't talk to me about that bill. Don't talk to me about that piece of legislation. No, I'm going to prosecute that person. I don't care. Yeah. And that's been the problem. Big industry in California has gotten away with murder because we haven't gone after polluters the way we should have. Look at the city of Richmond over there, what has happened to them with Chevron. It's a disgrace, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. So basically you'd see it as a bully pulpit for some of the issues you're raising in your book.
100%.
Yeah. And who else would you like to go after? We got just about 30 seconds.
Well, how about money lenders?
Yeah.
Money lenders who go up to little people and lend them $100 and get $400 back, and if they don't, they garnish their wages and everything else. Yeah. That's a disgrace.
You know, a reference to the money lenders in the temple, that's a great way to stop this show. Joe Cotchett, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and join us next time on The Game.